Hello, so my name is Liz Long and I'm the Heritage Apprenticeships Programme Manager at Historic England. I sit within Capacity Building team at HE and I'm going to be giving a very brief overview of some of the initiatives that we're involved in, but I'm going to be specifically talking about apprenticeships, technical education and also labour market research, as those are the areas that I support within the organisation. Okay. Right, so I'm sorry, there's a lot of text here, but these are just a couple of the initiatives that particularly Capacity Building team are involved in within HE. We deliver training at a range of different levels. So we're involved in running a Historic Environment Specialist Placement Scheme, which targets individuals that have some experience within heritage practice. So it could be recent graduates that have completed a relevant degree. It could be individuals that have worked in the sector for a short period of time but are looking to specialise. And we offer professional work-based placements for them in partnership with CIFA. Those placements specifically target areas where there are significant skills gaps within the professions. So that's an established programme that we run at Historic England. Two other established schemes at HE are the collaborative doctoral studentships, where we support three PhD studentships per year. They're co-supervised by Historic England staff. And we also support doctoral training partnerships, where we work with a consortium of universities to offer additional support for PhD students. Now, something completely new for Historic England, we've only had one cohort so far, is we run a positive action trainee scheme. So this targets BAME candidates specifically, and they're very short 8-week placements that we set up at Historic England, but it's a sector-wide scheme. So a number of organisations in the sector offer placements for this particular programme. We're just recruiting for our next group as we speak. So we also have a number of established courses at Historic England. So we run courses for new entrants to the sector, those that come in contact with the historic environment. So it could be planning officers within local authorities, but we also run courses for experienced conservation professionals, and that's through our Essentials, Helm and Heritage Practice courses. And we've recently, in the last 12 months, developed quite an extensive online training offer. So we run quite a number of webinars, and it could be from anything covering heritage crime to looking at the curtilage within listed buildings. So I'm going to go on and talk in a bit more detail about apprenticeships now. So these are the main areas of work that I support within the organisation. So we have our own internal apprenticeship programme at Historic England. It's a brand new programme. We took on our first 2 apprentices back in November, so it's still a very new scheme, and we recruit new staff, but we also offer upskilling or side skilling opportunities for existing members of staff. So you can create development opportunities through apprenticeships now in England. So apprenticeships are now being delivered at all levels, from level 2 all the way up to postgraduate degree and chartered status. I also convene a group called the Historic Environment Trailblazer, which is developing a number of apprenticeships specifically for historic environment professions. And we are trying to influence as much as possible the wider changes regarding technical education in England. So they are introducing the T-levels, which will be a vocational alternative to A-levels in England, and there will be specific career pathways that a 16-year-old can choose. So we're trying to influence what that career pathway will look like for cultural heritage. And finally, what underpins it all is labour market research, of course, identifying the skills gaps and skills shortages within individual professions. So just a bit of background in terms of apprenticeships. So this goes back to really 2012, when the government decided to review the way apprenticeships were designed and delivered. They recognised the value of apprenticeships and how they could really address specific skills needs within organisations. But they realised there wasn't enough of them and they weren't being delivered in many sectors. So as a result, they introduced a 3 million apprenticeship start target to increase the number of apprenticeships. And they also decided to improve the quality of apprenticeships. So particularly within England, apprenticeships have generally been designed by training providers. So as a result, it's been more often than not, the training provision has been based on the individuals that they employ within their organisations, rather than potentially the actual skills needs required by employers. So as a result, they introduced this trailblazer process, where they've placed employers at the heart of the process of designing brand new apprenticeships. And they've also made apprenticeships a protected term, so it must meet very specific requirements if you're offering an apprenticeship now. So in order to increase the number of apprenticeships in England and try and meet that 3 million apprenticeship target, and apprenticeships obviously a UK-wide programme, but in terms of England, how the apprenticeship levy affects us. So they've introduced 2 employer incentives, an apprenticeship levy, which affects all large employers in all sectors. So if you have an annual pay bill of over 3 million, then as an organisation, you will have to pay 0.5% of your annual pay bill as essentially an apprenticeship tax. Now, it's very different to how that apprenticeship levy will be spent in different countries in the UK. But in England, once you've paid that money, you can get it back as an employer, but you must spend it specifically on apprentices' training and assessment costs. So that's a big driver for employers in the sector to recruit apprentices in their organisations. They've also introduced a public sector target, so all public sector organisations must recruit 2.3% of their workforce must be apprenticeship starts, and that could be new apprentices, or it could be those development opportunities for existing staff through apprenticeships that I mentioned before. For Historic England, we pay a levy of about £150,000 per year, and we've got a public sector target which equates to about 22 apprenticeship starts annually. But we've got several problems in the sector with setting up these apprenticeship opportunities. There is a lot of goodwill behind setting up apprenticeships now amongst various different employers in the sector. We see the opportunities to attract a far wider audience to the sector, improve social mobility, and really address those skills shortages and gaps within specific organisations. But at the moment, apprenticeships don't exist for historic environment roles. So apprenticeships have traditionally existed within areas such as the construction sector, in finance, IT, but they've never really existed for areas such as archaeology, or for conservators, or for roles that perhaps work within heritage management. So as a result, the Historic Environment Trailblazer was formed. It's a partnership between employers, professional bodies, and also training providers in the sector. We have just over 70 representatives now that sit within the Historic Environment Trailblazer. And it's structured like this. There's 3 working groups developing 6 new apprenticeships for historic environment professions. The 2 most relevant today are the Archaeological Technician Level 3 apprenticeship. That's the furthest along. As Kate mentioned, it's recently been approved, which is great news. And we're really sort of at the last hurdle now when it comes to getting that apprenticeship ready for delivery. But we intend for that to be ready for delivery by September this year. We are also working towards developing an archaeological specialist apprenticeship. So that's a postgraduate degree level apprenticeship, and it could be used as upskilling opportunities for graduates or existing members of staff, or recruiting an A-level student. And the duration of that apprenticeship will vary according to the individual that you recruit. So we're looking to cover a range of different specialisms on that particular apprenticeship. There are 2 other apprenticeships which are also relevant to the archaeological sector, which are Historic Environment Advisor standards. So we are developing a level 4 and a level 7 standard as well. These are potentially more relevant to local authorities, where they're going to be supporting conservation officers, local archaeological officers, but also heritage advisors that cover sort of a broad range of advice in the context of the historic environment for various consultancies. And then for organisations like Historic England, we're looking to support designation coordinators, heritage at risk officers, and those types of posts through the apprenticeship. So they're quite generic apprenticeships, those ones. Which brings me on to T-levels. So in England, apprenticeships is just sort of part of this larger transformational change that the government have planned for technical education. They are introducing a vocational alternative to A-levels. So a 16-year-old will now be able to choose a particular area that they want to specialise in at the age of 16. And it will be based on what they're called 15 occupational maps. And there will sit a series of career pathways within these particular occupational areas. We are trying to influence this as much as possible. At the moment, we're kind of spread out because the heritage sector isn't quite as simple as being able to slot within one of these specific areas. We currently fall under a range at the moment, but we're looking to be moved to a cultural heritage pathway which sits under the creative and design panel. So this will create lots of opportunities in terms of attracting a far wider audience to the sector. The heritage sector will become far more visible and accessible to 16-year-olds. And the idea is that when they complete a T-level or a technical qualification within this area, they can go on to complete apprenticeships at higher levels. So that's technical education. And finally, I just wanted to touch on labour market research, mainly because this obviously underpins all of the different initiatives that we're currently involved in. We are currently reviewing the way that we commission labour market research. We've noticed that often we haven't been consistent in the labour market research that we've been commissioning for different subsectors. So we would like to commission more targeted, specific research in future. So we are looking at commissioning labour market research within these specific areas. So workforce composition, levels of diversity, skill shortages, skills gaps, trends in employment, barriers to employment and employment pathways, which will be particularly useful for internal audiences, but also we hope external audiences. We realise that we've got some really useful data, but not as many people are using that information as we would like. So we're also looking at the way that we present and share labour market research. Hence the infographics just here. So this is from the most recent Archaeological Specialist report produced by Landwood. And we're looking at how we can present some of that data in more of a sort of user-friendly way for various audiences. And finally, we're looking at how we can more cost-effectively commission labour market research. So there's a lot of workforce surveys that are being commissioned by various professional bodies, and we're looking at the moment how we can potentially influence those workforce surveys to get more useful data. And finally, continuing to commission LMI in partnership with the other home nations. So that's it. Quick run through.